listening to the TyePod, hosted by your friendly neighborhood PhD. Hi, everybody. It's another edition of the TyePod, and today I am joined by guest Clara Ritger, who is a trauma-informed coach, and she has several projects going, podcasting, writing, some other stuff she'll probably want to talk about a little bit later. So yeah, thanks for joining the show. I'm happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been trying to kind of open these things with something a little more fun and relaxed, just to start the flow. But so I wanted to ask you, like, what are some of the things you like most that you can just escape and that you enjoy just because you enjoy it, like hobbies or activities, anything like that, that kind of is your, I don't know, outlet for, for that space?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And actually, I'm going to be maybe a little controversial here and say that I am in a place in my life where I don't do anything to escape anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think as someone who has lived through the experience of being in a trauma body,
Mm-hmm.
I've spent my whole life escaping from the experience of
Oh,
life.
okay.
That once you sort of actually start to heal and come back into your body, you realize that you just want to be present for all of the experiences.
Yeah.
So for me, hobbies are actually like what brings me joy, what brings me deeper into the present moment in life.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I love reading. I like
Mm-hmm.
would spend hours as a child just like reading. I would read in the
Lost in the
car.
books. Yeah.
Yeah, lost in the books, read in the grocery store. And lately something I've been loving is playing tennis and paddle.
Nice.
Yeah, so I
Wait,
like I
like
just
you're talking about
really
like table tennis type thing too? Or just
no like
regular like
racket
tennis? Okay,
sports.
gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, regular.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, those are two things. How about you? What anything
Awesome.
you love?
I do like getting outside and like putting electronics away and just like going on a walk with my dog, and things like that. Just little things in nature type, it's one of the big deals. And obviously I have like, music, TV shows, that kind of stuff. So yeah, kind of a
Definitely.
range
Hike,
just
yeah.
depending on the emotion or where I'm at, yeah.
Hiking for me is definitely one of like my I think go-to places to like reconnect with myself.
Mhm.
And just like reconnect with like, yeah, the beauty of being on this planet. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think there's really cool resources and places to visit out there that are just you can't get on the screen. So yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Great. Well, that's awesome. I wanted to ask you too, you had some pictures, I believe, with the hot air balloons. Is that something like, have you ridden in one or have you just looked at them or what's that about?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, so I have been in 3 hot air balloons now.
Nice.
Yeah, and I feel really fortunate because it's definitely not a cheap not a cheap activity, I guess.
Yeah.
Although I am a little bit lucky in that I did some of the hot air balloons in like lower cost destinations, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the first time I was ever in a hot air balloon, I think it only cost like 80 US dollars
Hmm.
for a sunrise hot air balloon over the pyramids in Mexico.
Wow,
So
that
the
sounds
pyramids that are, yeah, just outside Mexico City. It was amazing. I was definitely scared to do it. And
yeah,
then once
I would
I
be.
did it, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I was totally hooked. It is way smoother and more peaceful than I expected.
Yeah.
You are floating. Like it's almost like if you imagine how you float in the water,
Similar
you
to
are
that feeling.
floating in the air. And I think in my brain, I thought it was like going to be more maybe
Like
like airplane
falling.
turbulence.
Yeah.
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 And it's not. It's just,
Wow, that's cool. What about the noise,
yeah,
like the noise when they adjust the flame, to change airflow? Is that really doesn't bother much?
it's not that noisy, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
no, I have a connection to the balloons because I was in New Mexico for about 30 years. So Balloon Fiesta, I don't know if you ever got to go there, but that was kind of one of our big things for the state. I guess it's still going pretty strong from what I hear. But
that's so cool. No, I've never seen that in New Mexico. Yeah.
yeah, there's like 50 plus balloons like, lined up in the field and it's a pretty big deal. They have like a festival and stuff. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. If you're
Yeah.
ever in the area of New Mexico, you might want to check that out. But
Definitely. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah, that's really cool. I think so many people kind of don't talk about the positive things as much just to balance out, some of the harsh, like more negative things going on. So I try to like, okay, let's start with the idea that we're all humans and have things we enjoy and want to do. So that's kind of where I like to start out with at least. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's a great place to start, and it's honestly a great like perspective in general on life. The way that I look at life is that life is everything, right? Life is the good and the bad, and
mhm,
what you look for, you will find. Everything is available to you and
mhm.
to your experience. So if you are focused on the bad, then you will find
Yeah.
evidence of bad. But if you focus on the good, you will find more evidence of good.
Hmm.
We get to choose where we put our attention, but in this modern digital age, I think so often we forget that we have the power of directing our attention, and instead we just
Yeah.
get sucked into the
The machine of,
marketing.
yeah.
social
Yeah.
media, the news, which is all of these things are vying for our attention.
And many of them bad too. I mean,
Yeah, and
yeah.
we act as though sort of, we are powerless to these things, but we're not.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure. I like that approach, because there's obviously a spectrum, right, of like emotions and different feelings and things. So I think it's good to focus on the other side when you can, because it seems like people don't talk about it enough, in my opinion. But anyway, yeah, that's really cool about all those activities you mentioned for sure. But yeah, as we kind of transition into like your story, and you had all of your medical needs and everything, and kind of where you're at now, do you want to just kind of give a brief overview of sort of what happened and your experience with disability and everything related?
Yeah, sure. Well, so in 2016, I was 24 years old and my appendix ruptured.
Mhm.
So most people have appendicitis and they get their appendix removed before it bursts,
Yeah.
but I didn't. And when mine burst, the pus, I guess, so to speak,
Yeah.
that was released into my body created multiple areas of abscess. And
Mhm.
I wound up being in the hospital for 17 days. And they had to do an open abdominal surgery.
Oof, that
And
sounds bad.
it was not great. They had to cut and reconnect my intestines because some of
Yeah.
the abscess was encasing my organs. And that experience sort of set in motion a period of 6 years
Mhm.
where I was constantly struggling with
Mhm.
my health, particularly my digestive health.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, I would say that I never fully healed from that surgery. It was
Yeah.
always something would flare up or there would be a complication, and I would go to the emergency room with like this swelling and inexplicable pain.
Mhm.
And I remember, once they did a CT scan and they looked at me and they said, we're not seeing anything on the scan, but we're
Mhm.
looking at you and we can see that you're obviously distended. Like
Right.
we just don't know what's going on. And that was kind of the constant refrain, was that like, it was like, well, you're coming to us and saying you're symptomatic. So we want to believe you, but like
Mhm.
you should be healthy. Like we don't know why you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't
Yeah,
the fact that I mean, they were listening to you and obviously were in agreement, but they couldn't find anything to officially try to treat, I guess.
definitely.
Yeah.
And I would say I was listened to more so when there was like a visible bloating going on,
Mhm.
distension of the belly going on.
Mhm.
I've always, though, separate from that, I've always sort of presented as on the outside as this healthy looking individual. I've always been
Mhm.
very active. And I think that sometimes I didn't receive the depth of investigation or the quickness of response that I
Mhm.
maybe needed, because they would look at me and be like, you should be healthy. And
Yeah.
in their minds, they were kind of like, you're going to be fine. Like everything about you is like the picture of health. So like,
Mhm.
if we just tell you you're going to be fine, you're going to be fine. And that wasn't always the case. Like
Yeah, I was gonna say,
that
how
was
did you feel about them talking that way with it?
it was frustrating. It
Yeah.
was definitely really frustrating because I felt like I had to sound the alarm I didn't feel like I had to sound the alarm many
Right.
times before I would receive the response that was needed. I got lucky over the years and I started to find doctors who did take me seriously, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, when I look back on that first surgery that I had that sort of set in motion all these events, I had been reporting for a period of 10 days. So they basically they did a first surgery to remove the appendix and then they
Mhm.
sent me home. And I was like, I don't feel good. And I went in for two different checkups and I was like, I don't feel good. And the doctor didn't take me seriously. And so 10 days later, I went back into the ER and that's when they were like, you are now almost in septic shock. Like we have to
Mhm.
admit you and do a second bigger surgery and whatever. But so, that was an instance where it was like, I think that doctor looked at me and was like, she's going to be fine. Like she's
Yeah.
complaining, but she's going to be fine. And
Yeah.
and the truth was I wasn't fine, right?
Yeah. No, that was a
And
little bit like presumptuous or something too, probably on the doctor's part, because, obviously, I mean, if he's saying that you look fine, well, that doesn't really help much.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. And I
Yeah.
think that's the challenge with it's honestly, I think that's sometimes the challenge with people who are like healthy. I think that's sometimes why diagnoses maybe happen too late for some
Mhm.
people, because I think doctors sometimes look at you and they're like, well, you run, you eat
Right.
well, your BMI is correct. You're right. They look at those sort of external factors of
Right.
health
And
and
dismiss
don't,
any other things that are going on. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you feel like you had signs over the years that the appendix was getting to be a problem, or was it just like all of a sudden, like the week of?
Right. I did. And so, for as much as I'm saying the doctors didn't take me seriously, it's
Yeah.
like, well, for a long period of time, I didn't take me seriously.
True.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember when I was in the hospital, there was some residents who came through to ask me some questions, just for their learning purposes. And I remember one of them asked me, when was the first time that you started to feel like pain in your appendix, or in that area? And I said, February. Now this was January of the following year that I was in the hospital. And
so
they
like
looked at me almost a year ago. They looked at me, they were like, 11 months ago. And I said, yeah. And they're like, why didn't you come in?
Yeah.
You know,
but you did have a few like warning signs or something wasn't quite right with.
I was absolutely having pain in that area constantly for a period of 11 months before it ruptured. I thought I was overall healthy. I grew up also in a family that's like, you fall down, they pick you up and tell you you're fine. Right. And so that's what I thought. I looked at it and I was like, oh, I just need to exercise more. I need to eat better. I need to, I was trying to address it thinking I was the problem, as opposed to like, no, this is just a problem that needs actual medical attention.
Wow. Well, that sounds really like a very painful year, basically. Wow.
Yeah.
So that actually, it's interesting that you had that experience, because I had a gallbladder that went basically septic and they had to take it out back in 21.
Okay.
And I ended up staying in ICU for like 40 days.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It was prison basically. So yeah, that just like really resonates. All those things you're talking about with, doctors, ER, all of that. I'm just like, oh wow, that's could be a trigger warning, but yeah.
And 40 days is a long time. I think, I'm sure that a lot of people listening to this, a lot of people in your audience are people who are very familiar with the medical system.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But for anybody who's listening to this who isn't, a day in the hospital is like the equivalent of like 3 months of real time.
Yeah.
Like 40 days, like feels like a year. Like
it is.
It's wild the way that hospital time sort of warps your sense of like real time. Like,
and like the longer you stay, the more warped it gets.
Yes, definitely. I mean, because 17 days for me felt like an eternity.
Yeah. I still don't know quite how I got through. I think I almost didn't, but yeah, I agree with you there. And then I think one of the nurses even said that the anesthesia that they gave me, or somebody told me this, that for every like anesthesia surgery you have or whatever, it like takes so many weeks to years before you're actually clear it out of your system completely, so it's just everything is crazy. And I don't know if that's like official. Obviously it could just be somebody dropping it out there, but it feels that way. I mean, it feels like it's just in the last maybe 6 months that things have started to feel kind of close to back. So, yeah.
It might be true, because even when you think about the antibiotics side of it, they pumped, because of the infection in me, they pumped so many antibiotics into my system that for a few years, the issues I was having, doctors weren't sure if it was just simply that my like gut biome had been like basically eradicated. There was definitely a period of 6 months where I was seeing a doctor who just was like, start taking probiotics. We're going to change your diet to this. We're going to see if simply just trying to regrow that removes all of your symptoms. It did for a period of time, but it ultimately didn't solve the issue. It was like kind of, like everything. It was sort of like, oh, this is working until it's not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That happens too often, I think. So kind of fast forwarding to now, do you feel like, you're close to your old self? Are you able to kind of do at least, part of what you could before?
The concept of the old self is such a fascinating one for me.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I'll say about this. The first is that my belief on all of this is that the goal should never be to get back to your old self, because your old self was the conditions that made you sick.
True.
Now, on the other side of illness, you get to build a life that is in alignment with what your body needs. And that may look like, and in air quotes here, less than what other people are able to do. But, release the comparison of what you feel like your life should be, how, other people can do this, I should be able to do this. And instead just choose what makes you feel good and run toward that, right?
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Like I basically lived that, because I was doing a postdoc in engineering and like trying to be a professor and training and all these things. And I think the burnout and the stress of that accelerated the gallbladder thing too. I'm thinking it has to be connected to stress some way. And so like after 40 days of, laying there, basically you're like, okay, I don't want to do burnout things anymore. Like let's figure out what I want to do and what, because like with health, all the jobs and all the like daily needs you have, it's like, well, first of all, I don't have near enough time to devote to a full-time job, let alone one that requires overtime substantially. So, I think that's totally right. I think you come out of things like that thinking like, okay, I'm getting rid of these issues if I can. So yeah.
And this, I mean, and this is really such a huge reframe, right? Because health is only a part-time job if you've designed a life where you have to manage it because you're flaring all your symptoms trying to do what everyone else is doing, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's part of why I didn't heal fully, because for 6 years I was trying to push my body back to return to normal. It's like, what even was normal? You know, I don't want to go back to normal. I want
Right.
I want a new life. You know, and if that means I have to work slightly less and I earn slightly less, fine. You know, I don't need so much money if I'm not spending thousands of dollars a year treating symptoms like in the medical system, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's a whole sort of reframe and approach. It's just sort of accepting, you know, and this goes sort of into the spiritual journey I think that I've been on. You know, you can resist or you can accept what is. You can surrender to, this is my experience of life, and everything just feels so much better in the body. You know, when you can do the exercise right now, like resistance, even just saying that word brings sort of attention, right, to the body.
Yeah.
And the word flow, like when you imagine water flowing through a stream, it is like an exhale, like a relief, a softening in the body.
Yeah.
And if you know, if you want to heal, you need to be soft in the body so that the body can do what it does best, right? The body knows how it needs to heal. You know, the doctors tell you need to get sleep, you need to drink water, you need to eat well, but you know, you need to rest in the bigger sense of the word. Your whole day needs to look like rest so that your body can work overtime to try to heal you. And the other thing I guess I wanted to say about sort of this idea of going back to the old self is that I think many people who have significant health experiences in their lifetime go through this. There is sort of a shift in who you are when you go through a health crisis, because at least for me, when I woke up from surgery, it wasn't like a light switch. It wasn't like, oh, I'm a different person now. Like, oh, I don't even, but over the months that followed, it had become clear to me that I had become a different person. And I almost didn't connect with the person who I was before the surgery. You know, I was much more connected to death, to you know, what matters to me in life. It gave me that clarity and that focus and that, like, oh my gosh, this is your one shot. Is this what you want to do with your one chance in this lifetime?
It's eye-opening to say the least. You know, like everything changed obviously when I had my surgery too, and it's the only one I've ever had. So it was just like super traumatic, you know, and it's just like all those things that you're talking about too, and like letting, I guess, old versions of yourself go for several reasons maybe, but you know, I feel like with like severe disabilities, even like with me having muscular dystrophy or any other type of progressive chronic thing, it's like you're losing versions of yourself, like maybe yearly, every 5 years or something. So it's reinventing, you know, yourself, it seems like, after so many years or something like that, because the progression that happens. And so like with surgeries, it like accelerates all the things that that are bad, basically. So yeah, I think that's a really good point to realize that it's, you know, you're never going to quite get back to that same person. Exactly.
And gosh, what you just said really like struck my heart, really. You know, this idea that you are losing versions of yourself.
Yeah.
We are all losing versions of ourselves every
Good
day.
point.
For you, it's just more poignant because it's in your physical body, you know, and so yours is both a physical, but there is the metaphysical aspect of it as well, right?
Right.
I think there is that a grief with that as well. You know, a grief of what you have lost. But sometimes I think we do get too caught up in wanting, you know, what we had, as opposed to embracing sort of the wisdom and the gift that we now have moving forward.
Yeah, that's really well said. That's like completely how I feel, you know. And again, when there's this idea of, I mean, eventually everyone will have some experience with disability, which I think is a major connective thread, you know, through time or whatever. But it's it doesn't have to, like, you don't have to have a severe disability, because life just has a way of stripping those layers, I think. So I think when you find that kind of commonality just across people in general, I just think that's such a uniting thing in a way. That's kind of how I look at it, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, that's going back to kind of your experience with, you know, with the appendix and everything. Like, what did you change as far as, did you like find nutrition things that helped you sort of like become, you know, healthier again from all of that, or like what approach did you take in recovery, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to honor too that I think you had earlier even asked, like, where are you today? Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So all of this is really tied together. After 6 years, so from 2016 to 2022, of just this constant struggle with my health, and one that frankly I was on invisibly. I think a lot of my friends, the people around me and people I worked with, had no idea that I was going through this because I hid it from them because
Mm.
I thought I had to. I don't know. It's weird. Health
That's
is a
kind of
weird.
internalized ableism, actually, in a way. Like it seems
Yes.
like, yeah,
There were absolutely instances, especially in the workplace, where I needed accommodations due to some of the physical symptoms that I was experiencing at the time, and I didn't get them probably only because I didn't ask for them. You know,
yeah.
I didn't want to be seen as like less than or something.
And there's that whole idea,
Um,
right? Like the more treatment and more obvious things are, it's like the more you feel like compelled to try to do more to meet that standard, so to speak. Yeah,
Definitely, definitely. And I think I thought like, oh, I'll be passed up for opportunities and whatever, you know.
yeah.
Anyway, I really hit a wall. So I had I had a follow-up surgery in December of 2021.
Mhm.
And that was sort of like a breaking point for me where I thought I'm never going to make it to retirement. Like I am at this rate, you know, I was 31 at the or 30 turning 31 at the time. I just was like, I my body is breaking down like faster than most people.
Mhm.
You know, the doctors joke that I have the plumbing of an 80-year-old. I was
Nice.
like, I'm not right. Like
Thanks for that.
I was like, right. I'm like, oh my God. So
Mhm.
I thought I have to see the world before I die. You know, it
Yeah,
was just sort of
yeah.
this moment where I was like, I'm just wasting this life working myself to death, literally to death. My body is
Mhm.
breaking down. Um, so I made the decision to just totally upend my life and travel the world.
Yeah.
And in the months leading up to the journey, I started working with my therapist again. And she sort of, you know, got me to be like, you're going to see the world and you're going to heal. And I was like, I'm going to see the world, I'm going to heal. Okay. You know,
Like hand
so
wavy, like, yeah.
yeah. I'm like, whatever, you know, the healing journey. You know, I was like every skeptic. Well, fast forward
Yeah.
to actually healing and then being like, wait, what? Like this is people have to know about this, right?
Mhm.
Coming to the other side, you know, I was in and out of hospitals and doctor's appointments for 6 years, and a year into the journey, I hadn't had any like remarkable sort of pain or
Mhm.
symptoms that needed, you know, attention, needed to be dealt with.
Mhm.
That was, you know, 2022 going into 2023. Well, we're now in 2025. The last time that I was in the doctor's office trying to figure out what was going on with me was May of 2022. I am
Wow.
next
So,
month, and you know, by the time this comes out, I will be 3 years, right? A period of 6 years where I was in and out
yeah.
of doctors and hospitals. Now a period of 3 years. If you had asked me 3 years ago, I would like and said, "Oh yeah, you're going to now be like 3 years into your healing journey, and like you
Mhm.
won't have gone to the doctor's office at all with
Mhm.
symptoms." I would have like laughed at you and been like, "Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no." So so that's why I decided to write a book about it because I thought if other people, you know, if the me 3 years ago or the me 6 years ago, if people knew what I know now, I think a
Yeah.
lot more people would heal. Um, so you asked though, what have I done? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's many things. And I think this is sometimes the challenge for people to heal is that I think we all want like one easy fix,
Yeah.
right?
Always.
I mean, and frankly, doctors wanted one easy fix. You know, they were like, do this diet, right?
Yeah.
Or we're gonna do this like follow-up surgery, or we're
Yeah.
gonna do that, right? And it's like it wasn't one thing, unfortunately. It
Right.
was many things working together. I would say the biggest thing though for me, the thing that the biggest shift and the reason that
Mhm.
I wrote the book was the discovery that I was living in a body of trauma, meaning that the stress response, the fight or flight response, the
Mhm.
tension the cortisol, the hypervigilance, the readiness to respond was the body that I lived in perhaps all day long, even when I was sleeping.
Mhm.
And if not, at least 70%, 75% of my waking existence was a body of stress.
Yeah.
Once I started to become aware of just the experience of being in my body and soften it, I think that sort of created a ripple effect of my body's ability to actually finally start to heal.
Mhm.
Because what are you not in when you're in fight or flight mode? You're not in rest and digest mode. Well,
Right.
all of my issues were gastrointestinal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a complicating thing there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But now, how do you get to a body of peace, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is not an easy journey. And that is, I would say, something, frankly, I'm still on today.
Do you
I'm
feel like it's so, I mean, still just so individualized too? It seems like healing and what it takes. I don't know. It seems like that might be common.
I mean, it's definitely individualized, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's sort of experience and the way that we internalize trauma is different.
Yeah.
But awareness is the first piece. You have to just even be aware of the experience of what it feels like to be in your body in order to take action to change that experience. And for people like us with chronic illnesses, I think that, so I had trauma and I had a chronic illness, right? And those two things were separate but connected.
Right.
I think the challenge, right? Like I think that part of the chronic illness, right, is then caused by the fact that I'm in a trauma body, but the trauma was not because of the chronic illness. They were kind of, what came
Right.
first, the chicken or the egg? They both.
Yeah, that makes
Anyway.
sense. Yeah. Yeah. It's conundrum.
Yeah. But for people with chronic illness, we are conditioned to leave the body because it doesn't feel good.
Right.
Like the pain that we're experiencing from the illness doesn't feel good. I don't want to be present for that.
Definitely
So that's
not.
like an added challenge and layer on top of the trauma, right? Is that you have to then call yourself back into the experience of being in your body in order to change the experience that you're having. And that is not easy.
Yeah. Just talking right then, you reminded me of, how like trees that are like ancient, or like really, really old, they have the rings, for like each like section of growth. It kind of just felt like you were describing that in a way.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. It's so layered. It's so, It's
And
so
not,
layered.
not evenly layered either, right? I mean, it's like, I'm sure there's like spillover between different ones, so to speak.
Absolutely. I mean, and you've heard the phrase like healing isn't linear. That's absolutely been my experience as well.
Right.
It's like I'll have good periods and then I'll have bad periods. I'll have periods where I've like figured it out, so to speak.
Like,
and then
life's not really a linear period. It seems like.
I know. It's just
let's get philosophical here now.
No, totally. It's it is, but it feels, the spiritual awakening, the philosophy of it all is part of also how I healed, right? It's a multifaceted journey, but it was the sort of recognition that it's like, you know what, life is suffering. The Buddhism, this is the plate of suffering that I was given. Someone else is given a different plate of suffering. We're all sort of given our own little cocktail, so to speak, of suffering.
Yeah,
so how do we overcome the feeling? It's not necessarily about overcoming the challenge itself. It's overcoming the feeling of challenge in the body when you rise to meet life's challenges. How can you greet? Yeah, you're always going to have a challenge. So you can do this and muscle through it, tense your fists and lock up. Or you could be like, okay, here's another challenge. Let's figure this out. And I think that piece is helpful for people with chronic illness. I think
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that, after the surgery and all of a sudden I wasn't employed for a while and I had all this time on my hands, I think that forces some level of, kind of shifting your journey and then trying to get to that place. It's more like, this is who I am and where I'm at this point. And accept that and at least as good as you can, but it's just constant. I mean, the waves of things, I guess, that come, and it's just for disability and chronic illness, it comes faster, like all those things. So I'm trying to think. There's a question I was going to ask you based on that, but I'll have to come back to it probably. I remember what it was. So as you're becoming a certified, or I guess you're already a certified trauma-informed coach, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about like what that's like? But also I'm curious, have you had any pushback, anybody that's like, well, you're generalized, like how do you work with people that maybe doubt, some of these other practices that they can try?
Yeah, all great questions. So I'll sort of update you on the journey. No, for sure. So, okay. So going back to that awareness piece, right? How do you even bring awareness into your body of like what the experience is like of being in your body? For me, meditation was a huge like eye opener, which is like funny to say because like I was closing my eyes, a metaphorical eye opener, laughing at my own nonsense here. So meditation was instrumental, and meditation, I think one of the challenges with meditation is that it's so like, what is it? I don't understand. Like, it's this like secretive thing. Like, am I doing it wrong? That people, I think that fear and that like the unknown keeps people from even trying. But, meditation is simply being in the present moment, being present for the experience of life. So meditation, sure, is sitting on a cushion and closing your eyes, but meditation can also be the way that you eat breakfast. The presence that you bring.
I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, that's pretty taste.
Good. Yeah. And that once you start to, you start meditating so that you can carry the benefits of meditation into the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So So meditation awakened me to the trauma body. Then it was like, okay, how do I deal with the trauma body?
Yeah.
Right. And so I wound up doing so much research and so much experimentation and investigation over this long period of time that I got trauma informed, coach certified, mostly for me, but also so that, as I was telling my story and trying to help people awaken to the experience of life and to the capacity or the opportunity to heal, that I could point to these like specific resources. So I'm now trauma informed coach certified, and I've just started meditation teacher training. So I'm going to be able to sort of offer my hope. And I think that for people with trauma and chronic illness, I think the meditation community sort of bypasses them a lot of the time.
It does. It does. And I think, at least in my experience, there's a lot of people with disabilities that are super skeptical of that. And then they almost get defensive if it's brought up, even if it's not saying they should necessarily do it. Just the fact that it has that negative stigma in some people's minds. And I'm just like, well, it's not that defined. It's not so black and white. And then when you said it's like, well, maybe it's eating breakfast in the morning or watching a sunset, who knows? Like any of those things. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's sort of like, how can I bring sort of the benefits to that group of individuals who needs it differently?
Right.
Sitting on a cushion, closing your eyes isn't going to work for everyone. And they still deserve, the benefits. They perhaps need it more than others, right? In order to heal. So yeah. So to answer the question now about skeptics, I mean, look, you're looking at like the biggest skeptic on the planet, right? Like,
well, I still have my self view on here though. So there's two people on that.
There's two of us. Yeah. Welcome to the skeptics tea time.
Yeah. Next week on the Skeptic podcast.
Yeah, seriously. But, I go back to a conversation that I had with one of my friends who's an emergency room doctor, right? And he has seen me go through this transformation of where I was 3 years ago to where I am today.
Yeah.
And he was like, he was shocked. He just was like, it's undeniable that you have changed. He's like, to be honest, looking at you, he's like, it looks like you've aged in reverse. He's like, I'm like, what is her secret? And apparently your secret is like healing your trauma. And he said, look, we don't know in the medical field so much about the power of the mind.
Yeah.
We haven't studied it, and we've separated the mind from the body in the way that we treat issues, right?
I just do not understand that line of, because it's all one, it's in sync, one system, basically.
It's one system, right? And he said, look, he's like, if somebody were to ask me, like, if they had a cancer diagnosis or something, and they were like, should I meditate? Should I do affirmations? Should I, do sound bowl healing, whatever?
Right. Yep.
He's like, it can't hurt. He's like, can I tell you with medical research and certainty that you're going to heal yourself that way? No, I can't tell you that. But I can tell you that there are plenty of anecdotes of people who have healed themselves that way, whether it was that or something that the medical system provided them that actually was the reason they healed. We don't know. He's like, but it can't hurt. So if you're interested in doing it, you might as well do it.
Right. And I think it's also important to realize that there isn't just one way to go about it. I mean, I didn't do any kind of therapy, life coaching, anything until I believe it was like 22 range, and so I started kind of exploring, well, what if I visit with this type of therapist or do this activity or do affirmations, like I feel like I found a balance that worked. And it's funny now, I don't even use a lot of those things. I think they're just almost embedded now. So I'm not even conscious that it's, helping me to keep processing things. I think, at least.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head, right? People are like, I don't have time for this. And it's like, true. Like you can't live your entire life with like a 5 a.m. morning routine that is like 3 hours of like self-care, right?
Oh, thank you.
Like it's not going to work. The idea is exactly that. It's that you employ these practices for a period of time until it sort of changes your relationship to yourself, your body, and your life. And then you don't have to do these things forever.
That's refreshing too, because it's just like, well, I can spin it in a way that helps me grow and become a better person for the better. And then, that stuff's just kind of just there in the background, to help you get through, I think. And that was something that was hard for me because I thought, well, I'm just going to start meditating twice every day, every single day from now until, 30 years. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I'm just like, well, wait a minute. I don't I have it there, but do I need to go through the whole process and pull it out and go through it? Or is it just like taken care of?
Yeah. Well, and I'll touch on sort of the dietary stuff for me, right? I have now reached a point, which honestly, I could cry, like just thinking about this. I've now reached a point where I don't have to think about what I eat anymore. Like,
I need some
and
of that.
I used to be in a body where every meal was a source of anxiety because I didn't know if it was going to give me like that pins and needles or worse, that like knife feeling in my gut or that bloating that just wouldn't pass. And now it's like, I've almost sort of it's just become sort of like I know what to choose on a menu that is going to make me feel good.
Mhm.
And I just choose to eat in a way that makes me feel good. And I don't have to fully cut things out, right? I can pretty much kind of eat most things.
Mhm.
But there are certain food groups or whatever I have to eat in moderation or be careful
Right.
around, right?
And
Like dairy
sparingly,
being one of
probably.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But if I want to have a little bit of dairy in one meal, like I can do that.
Mhm.
And now it typically doesn't cause me pain. If I ate dairy like 3 meals in a row or 2 days in a
Then you
row,
feel a
like
little something.
then it
Yeah,
might.
yeah,
But I no longer, I'm no longer in that mindset of like, oh, I'm a restricted eater. Like
yeah.
I don't feel like I can't live life the way that I want to anymore. And that is like, oh, that the mental load of that being
Hmm.
taken off has
It's
been
like
life
liberating.
changing,
Yeah,
liberating. Oh,
yeah,
yes, it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. That's wow. That's really cool because I've experienced a lot of those similar things, and like going from I was on a feeding tube and all of that wonderful stuff in ER, in ICU, and then I got home and finally got off of it. And like that first drink of coffee or that first bite of, I don't even know what I was eating at the time, but it was just like, oh man, like I know I appreciated it before, but I didn't appreciate it this much. Um, yeah, so
That is so true. There is nothing
yeah.
like eating foods that you couldn't have.
And I thought I'd never have again, to be honest. So it's like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
man, yeah, that's great though. I mean, like the whole moderation approach is probably, you know, that way you still have some enjoyment, like because that is part of, I think, enjoying things around you is trying foods that maybe aren't necessarily health related, or maybe they just cause problems, like you said, with dairy. But yeah, I love that approach to it because it's not so rigid. Like you can only eat these 10 things, 3 ounces each on a Tuesday. I don't know. It's
Oh, it was too much to keep track of. I literally used to have to keep like a printout of what I was
yeah,
allowed to eat and what I wasn't allowed to eat. Like,
yeah,
oh God. I mean, I am so glad to be on the other side of this. Like it is so, yeah, it's changed my life. Like 3 years ago, I thought I was careening toward death. And
yeah,
now I'm like, wow, like I still have so much amazing life ahead of me and amazing, right? Like
yeah,
I'm not living a life of constant pain anymore. Like now I'm
right.
living that peace. And yeah, I feel
And
so
even like,
lucky.
yeah, and even a little piece of that, I think, would help a lot of people. I mean, just I know sometimes it's not like you could ever fully get to where maybe the pain's 100% gone or anything like that, but I do feel like, you can like lessen symptoms, you can kind of regain some level of control over, your body, whatever that illness is that it's gone through. But yeah, bodies are kind of resilient in a way. So
They are, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, the body is designed to live. Like
yeah,
all life is designed to live, right?
yeah.
That's the
By definition.
innate, by
Yeah.
definition, there is an innate survival mechanism in the body, in every
Hmm.
living thing to continue living. And I think humans, I think in many ways, we've gotten in our own way of living, right? And so it's also a
Absolutely.
lot of this healing is also about realizing like, whoa, what am I doing? Like that's getting in the way of like my body knowing
Yeah.
what it needs to do and allowing it to do that. Like let's release those things.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like in a way it's like moderating Western culture in a way. You know what I mean? Like if you just like if you sample just certain parts of it, but then you also try to bring in, more open-minded healing and practices and things. Yeah, I think it helps a lot.
Definitely. I mean, I always like to say it like this. Western medicine saved my life, but
Yeah,
it didn't make me well.
that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah.
That was something that I had to figure out on my healing journey around the world. And yeah, definitely learning about and integrating some Eastern medicine practices
Yeah.
have helped bring me to a state of well-being.
Yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense, and you, in my mind, you can be any level of disability and find things within that style of healing that works. It seems like even like when I was in college, I was seeing the yoga mats being taken around by everybody, and I'm like, I'm never going to do that. Why are they even worried about, doing yoga stretching? I'm like, I can never get my, that kind of practice going. But I did, very modified version, but it's really good. Like there's stretching, like flexing muscles, keeping them firing, just all those kinds of things. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Even though you might go into it thinking you can't do any of it, well, there's actually you can adjust and adapt it to fit you. I think that's really important for people to realize.
Yeah. And I mean, and especially in the West, people associate yoga with the physical activity, but
Yeah.
yoga actually is
Well, it
a
was
much,
based on mental, right? I mean, like that's how it
yeah,
originated. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing like how you can kind of tailor all of that to what fits you and how it helps your like quality of life and all those areas. So it's cool when it happens like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enlightenment, basically.
No, for sure. And I would say a lot of my journey has been about sort of unwriting the social conditioning
Yeah.
and rewriting like a life that feels like mine, that feels good in my body. And
Yeah.
that is, yeah, exactly what you just said. It's like you can build your own practice across
Yeah.
any of this stuff. Like whatever works for you, that's whatever feels good in your body, that's the thing that you move toward. Just
Right.
constantly move in that direction.
Yeah. Inching along if you have to. Just know the direction to go. That's huge. That's actually a good segue too, I think, into the like a little bit of maybe some advocacy stuff, like how maybe you've gotten involved in like what's your goal as far as helping others to navigate these types of challenges.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I am so passionate about this and wanting to help other people heal. Like I
Mhm.
really fundamentally believe if people knew what I know now, that we would see so many people overcome chronic illness and all of a sudden be like, wow, I don't have that anymore. That was my
Yeah.
story, right? And I've met multiple people who like have done similar things to what I did. And I know one guy who had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis and he's now cancer free
Mhm.
just from doing things like what I've done, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's why I wrote the book. So I wrote a book about my journey,
Mhm.
and now what I'm doing is working on growing an audience, so that I can get a publishing deal for the book. Unfortunately, welcome to 2025. You kind of have
Western
to,
culture.
yeah, have your own audience before you
Yeah.
can, get the publishing deal. But the book, people need to read this book, right? The book has the path, right?
Yeah.
Or not, if not the path, has a path. Like, I think just by reading it, people's eyes will be opened in some way, like, oh, I never thought about this way, or I never considered even trying this. Like I
Yeah.
could try this as well. Um, but right now, what I'm doing is I have a free weekly newsletter called Adventure to Awaken
Mhm.
that comes out and sort of shares the perspectives and the wisdom that I got sort of from the healing journey, traveling the world, and sort of the way that I see things now on the other side of healing. And so I think even just reading that
Mhm.
can be really helpful to start to change, as we were talking about, coming full circle at the very beginning,
Yeah.
to sort of shift your attention from the way that some of the, negativity in the world, is drawing you in and trying to
Mhm.
hook you and addict you to that. This is sort of, here's another way of seeing the world. Here's the
Yeah.
world, the way that I see it, right?
Another pathway that could be an option. Yeah. Yeah.
And like I was saying before, it's like, okay, let's move in the direction of things that make you feel good, things that make you feel more connected to life, to your community, to the experience, right? To
Yeah.
yourself and your body. That's sort of what I want to be offering people. So yeah, I mean, I think in the coming months, I'll be able to offer like more of a trauma informed meditation
Mhm.
resource as I embark on this healing journey. I'm planning to share the experience of
Yeah.
my continued healing, right? Because healing is a choice that I have to make every single day. It's not just like, oh, I'm healed. Like
Good point.
there are still symptoms and things that pop up for me that I have to address, right? But
Right.
the difference is now I listen to my body and I make changes in the moment as opposed to waiting 11 months until the appendix ruptures,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's kind of how I did with the gallbladder. So I think we both learned that lesson.
Learn that lesson, right? I'm
Yeah.
here. I'm
Yeah.
here. It's like, what do you have to teach me? What is not working? My body is manifesting. If something's not working in my life, my body is responding to what's
Mhm.
not working. It's telling me what I need to know. And I now need to act and make changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm also working on right now, and this will probably be out by the time that this podcast comes out. So if you
Mhm.
sign up for my newsletter, you will have access to this. But I'm working on putting out a resource for people to, start to take their own sort of healing journey. So, I was very fortunate. I mean, this is the product of overworking yourself to death. But I was able to take like a sabbatical, right? And travel the world for 15 months and try to figure this all out, and figured
Mhm.
it out. Not everybody is going to be able to do that. And
True.
I
Right.
recognize that. And those people deserve healing too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what I'm putting together is a resource for how to take your own self-guided healing retreat for 1 week.
Mhm.
Just how to do it for free. You don't have to pay $5,000 to get yourself to Bali to go
Yeah.
and do this, right?
Yeah.
Here's how to do it for $500, right? To find like an Airbnb, to find what I give you all that sort of, here's how to do it, but
Yeah.
the resource is free. Like I'm giving you this guide for free. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get this guide and it'll walk you through like, here's your daily schedule, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that by the end of the week you're going to be healed. It's that by the end of the week you're going to have been exposed to different practices and different sort of self-inquiry, like that ability to be with yourself that then allows you to start to make healing choices in your daily life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So wanting to at least get something like that out there for people who are
Absolutely.
curious, and if you have questions for me, like I'm on Threads, I've got my newsletter, if you just literally, if you get one of my newsletters and you like email me back, I'll
Yeah.
write back to you. Like I want to help people. Like on this journey, it has been life-changing for me,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it has been life-saving for me.
And you know, it's almost like even the smallest amount of help that could provide to just one person, you know, would be, I mean, that's kind of how I've looked at this whole idea of, you know, using social media maybe to help people or amplify voices with the podcast, anything like that. You know, just I think there's such, I don't know, it's really great. Is all I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, this has been really, really good, Claire. It's been nice to visit with you. And yeah, I definitely will include all the info on how to get the newsletter, and definitely whenever the book comes out too. Like I'm going to be one of the first readers, I'm sure. So
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I can't wait to share the book with the world. And
yeah,
yeah, the link will be in the description, but you could also just go to adventure2awaken.com and
and that's
sign up.
your website basically with all that. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I'll definitely be in touch, and thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Beautiful conversation.
Yeah.